Hello, hello. So I'm here today with a very, blessed and very just enlightening of a message. I basically got a huge epiphany on this message, okay? So I'm going to try and deliver it in the best way I can that the Lord gave me. So I'm going to kind of start with all the pieces and go from there. So, what if I was to tell you that over the course of the last 7 years in particular, specifically 5, but 7 years in particular, it wasn't the devil per se, or these evil demonic people per se coming after you or going against you, that it was actually God, right? God. God was going against you. Okay, this is what the Lord was saying to me, and I'll explain. So, a couple weeks ago, I believe it was, something like that, I was talking about the number 7. And that was when the Lord had first brought the number 7 to my attention. And I believe I put it in one of the past words. I made mention of it. And it was early, like the Lord had just mentioned it and kind of left it there and didn't give me any more development on it. And He does that often. He'll give me almost like a bite or two of something, but He won't let me eat the whole thing until later, right? And when that happens, I typically may mention it, but I won't dive into it because I don't have all of the pieces yet, right? So it's something that He wants to bring back to me at a later date. And then I can remember the thing He brought to me in the past with the thing in the present, and I can put it all together to make the message, right? And that's what happened here. So He brought the number 7 up to me. I believe it was in like May, April or May, sometime in there. So a couple weeks ago, it was actually on June 2nd. The date was June 2nd, and I can actually post the photo on a community post because it's in my photo reel, my photo gallery, right, on my phone. But the Lord highlighted to me my speedometer, and I drive an older vehicle. My speedometer on, or I guess not my speedometer, sorry, my odometer on my vehicle, and it was the mileage, my mileage, right? And the Lord has pointed out the mileage numbers to me in the past when it's been in triples. So like 333, 555, He's highlighted it to me to show me, right? And it was funny because I had drove the day before and wasn't tasked to pay attention. I didn't even look down on it on June 1st. And then I had parked my vehicle in my driveway and hadn't drove for like 24 hours or 12 hours, whatever, something like that. And now it's June 2nd the next day and I'm about to leave. And had I have left without paying any attention before leaving, I would have rolled over on my odometer and it wouldn't have had the relevance to me that it ended up having, right? So me and my kids get into my vehicle, the Lord's saying, look at the odometer. And so I look down at the odometer, even though I haven't looked at it in weeks, weeks to up to this point. The numbers on it was 197777. 197777. So there was 4 7s exactly in a row, right? Now it's one thing to get a triple, like triple digits, twos, threes, fours, fives, but to get quads, like all 4 numbers, right? And because the first number is my higher mileage number versus my little mileage number, it was crazy that I spotted that because had I had drove just up the street, it would have rolled over to 778 and it wouldn't have been the same, right? So the Lord told me that He basically had me park, like get home when I did and park when I did on the first, not drive anywhere, and before I left on the second, show it to me before it rolled over, just so I could get that perfect sequence of 4 7s in a row. And I know that, 7s are like a superstitious lucky number. Like if you are playing the slot machine and you get 7s, it's good, right? Again, not condoning gambling, just simply speaking. That 7 is a very powerful number. It's not just fluke, right? So I was like, okay, that's weird, Lord, right? That not only that it's 4 7s in a row, but that you had me pay attention to it right on time, because it only takes a minute or two of driving for your odometer to roll over to the next number, right? And so the Lord, on top of that, had me take a photo of it as kind of like a memory of it. And I was like, okay, so I did all that. So now here we are today on the 14th. That was 12 days ago. And I kind of forgot all about it, right? And then But when it happened on the second, I was thinking, okay, you made mention to me about the number 7 before, prior, like last month. Now I got 4 sevens on my odometer. There's something clearly, and you're highlighting it to me, you're bringing it to my attention. There's clearly something going around the number 7, right? And again, don't have all the pieces yet. So we fast forward to today, 12 days later, and this morning, I wasn't even thinking about the number 7. The Lord had brought it back up to my attention, and he was saying 7-year cycle, 7-year cycle. Then he started to run through my mind all the different things I've heard of the number 7 throughout my years of life, like the 7-year itch that people can have during relationships. I've also heard that every 7 years our cells in our body change over, and that if we're going to get cancer or terminal illness, well, not just terminal, but some sort of disease, right, that it'll happen. Typically, scientists have proven that around the time that this cell switch over happens, because when the cells are supposed to switch every 7 years, and when they do this switch over, this changeover, the old ones die and the new ones come around, that crossing over can sometimes cause glitches in our system, right? And that's how we can all of a sudden, within a year be really sick and stuff like that. That they believe it's to do sometimes with this cell switchover that our body does. So basically every 7 years, just biologically, our body can regenerate itself cell-wise, the cellular structure, right? Don't get all into me on that. That's just something that I've heard in passing. And the Lord was reminding me of that. And then also about Joseph and the 7 years, right? Because in the book of Genesis, Joseph's story talks about this. Now, I've made words on Joseph in his story in the past regarding, the wicked ones and the righteous ones that are in the world, right? Because the Lord has shown me numerous times that the story the story of Joseph that played out all the way back in the book of Genesis, first book in the Bible, is playing out as we speak right now, this very moment, and has been playing out through all these 2,000 whatever thousands of years since biblical days. It's an ongoing saga, the Lord was saying. So he's had me take all this information. Oh, and thank you, Lord, hallelujah. He's also just keeps reminding me that the other thing he was showing me about the number 7, and this relates and applies to this message, is that every 7 years your credit gets cleared, right? Now, the Lord has told me before in the past that banks and credit rating and stuff, they don't scratch off the past because they're nice to you, they're sweethearts. They give you a 7-year turnover because that's what the Bible talks about. The Bible talks about, I can't remember the exact scripture, but the Lord's led it to me in the past, but he's reminding me of it now. But there's a scripture in the Bible that talks about that debts shall be forgiven after every 7 years. That you're not to keep a record. It also talks about letting your servants and slaves be set free every 7 years. So all these little nuances, they all play into this message and this bigger picture. So I hope you're understanding that there's just different pieces over the course of the last month, basically from May to June, that the Lord has, in physical ways was showing me my odometer, and through his messages to me and stuff and little memories and things, he's been highlighting this number 7, this number 7. So this morning he told me, he said the number 7 is the most holy number. And I kind of questioned that. I was like, well, wouldn't the number 3 be more holy? Because that's the Trinity number, right? The Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And he's like, oh yeah, that's a holy number too. But no. Number 7 is holy in its own right, because everything begins and ends with 7. That's what the Lord was saying. Everything begins and ends with 7. Then he started to show me about the credit thing, for instance, is that you basically have 7 years to ruin your credit if you so choose to, and just destroy it. And then after 7 years, those debts are cleared off and you start from scratch again. It's a reset every 7 years when it comes to your debts and your credit, right? The same thing goes is that every 7 years in a relationship, there's that old saying about 7-year itch. I think there was even a movie put out in the 50s called the 7-year itch. So it's like an old phrase, meaning that every 7 years in a relationship is when, if there's going to be cheating and trouble and drama, it'll crop up around the 7-year period, right? So the Lord was showing me that 7 is a make or break number. It can make bad things good and make good things bad. A good marriage can hit the 7-year patch and go down. A bad marriage could hit the 7-year patch and go up. You could have great credit for 7 years and go for another 7 years and have 14 years of good credit. Or you could start out with good credit, ruin your credit sometime over the course of 7 years. And after the 7 years, it resets and you get to start from scratch, right? And so the Lord was telling me the 7 days of the week as well, is that this is why the Bible talks about that he created the world for 6 days and rested on the seventh. And I'm not going to get into the debate of if Saturday's the end of the week or Sunday's the end of the week or Monday's the beginning of the week and all that stuff, because honestly, it doesn't matter. But we're aware that the week, 7 days on a calendar, marks when the week ends and then begins again, right? And so society looks at like Monday to Sunday as 1 week, and then from Sunday to Monday as a reset and a whole new week starts. So when it's Friday, you say, I'll get to it next week, right? Weekend. We call Saturday, Sunday the weekend, meaning that the week is coming to an end. It's tapering off, and come Monday, it starts afresh. It starts anew, right? Again, based off of biblical principles. So the Lord was saying the fact that we walk around the world, believers and unbelievers alike, but yet we follow the 7-day work week, right? That is homage to the Bible and how God spent 7 days creating the world. Well, 6 days, and on the seventh day he rested. This is why we take Sundays off. We still pay homage and honor to the book of Genesis from God in our day-to-day life today in 2025, including the debt reset. What the Bible talks about this is that debts are supposed to be forgiven after every 7 years, and the world still practices this fashion today. Again, the Lord is saying this isn't man coming up with these things. This is the way the world's always been for hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's because it's homage to the Bible, the way that God originally structured things on earth. Okay. So I was like, wow, this is very interesting. So yeah, this message is crazy. Like, the Lord gave me so many little, and when I have these messages like this, some messages he gives me are spur of the moment, right? In the moment. Other messages are like ones like this where he'll have me chew on it for a while, sometimes weeks or months. And then he'll come to me with the full picture and say, okay, now it's time. And he wants me to go release it, right? So I even sat on this earlier this morning, was like, I'm going to wait a bit longer, Lord, more development. And Lord's like, no. And so he kept nudging me with this word, right? All throughout my day today. I was like, okay, I'm going to make the video. And the Lord's like, okay. So I have to take what I have already and put it together and make this word. But for me, I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, because I knew what I knew about the number 7 leading up to when I started to walk with the Lord. But when he gave me all these little fragments and pieces and started to show me how it comes together, it blew my mind, right? And I'm going to get into it. So that was the foundation about the number 7. And even like some people that don't walk with God consider number 7 to be superstitious, right? The Lord was also mentioning that too. So 7 is a very powerful number. It's a very holy number. And the Lord is saying that when you're being shown this number in our physical world and or spiritually, supernaturally from the Lord, that you're to take that as a good sign. Some people may say that's a bad sign. No, the Lord has had me every time see it as a good thing. And I guess it could go both ways, good or bad, depending on your scenario. But for the most part, whenever the Lord has shown it to me, it's shown to me and highlighted to me in a positive way, right? So then with that said, then the Lord started to speak about July. And I've talked about July before this word came to me, on and off over the course of the last couple of months, because the Lord has been highlighting that. Now, in July is when we're going to start a new season. We're going to cross over from spring season into July. I believe spring ends June 20th and the first day of summer is June 20th, on or around that day, right? So come July, we're right in the middle of summer. We're in a whole new season, okay? That's also the 7th month. The Lord was also highlighting to me July 7th, 7-7, okay? Now, get this. If you take 2025 and you add up the last 2 digits, and this is what the Lord was saying to me, 5 plus 2 equals 7, right? So July, 7th month, 7th day, and 5 plus 2 is 7. 7, 7, 7. This is another thing the Lord was showing me. So July of 2025, the 7th month of 2025, the month is going to be significant. Okay, this is the prophecy portion. July is going to mark being into the swing of a new season. And as we know, seasons count. And it's also going to be a powerful month, because out of all the 12 months of the year, it's going to be the only month in 2025 that matches the 7, right? Of the last digits of 2025. Then the Lord said July 7th specifically. So that might be a day that's good for some and not so good for others, okay? And that's going to lead me into the part that the Lord was showing me. So he was talking about that when I started this message out by saying that it's been the Lord coming against you this entire time, chosen one, it's because it has been the Lord, okay? So the Lord has been the one coming at you, not because of personal reasons. I know that the enemy has tried to make you believe through whispering in your ear and through other people that you're a loser, you're not good, you're being punished, you're under judgment, the reason why you're going through struggles and hardships is because of karma and you deserve it and you're a bad person and blah, 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 blah. The Lord is saying that's kind of true, but not at the same time, because the enemy's a liar, okay? So we have thought, with that being said, that it's been the enemy himself coming at us these last few years, and that he's been sending agents in the form of wicked people to come against us these last 7 years, just to try to torture us and bother us, right? And the Lord is saying our perception is correct to a point. The Lord sent those people to come and attack us. And we may say, what are you talking about, Lord? I'm a righteous person. I'm a good person, right? Right. You're correct. But it's not a personal thing. Every 7 years, the good people have to go through a struggle cycle. And then eventually the time comes where the bad people go through a 7-year struggle cycle. The Lord said it's no different than the golden rule, where what you do unto others is going to be done unto you, right? So even good people can receive judgment and conviction from God, because we're not perfect. So, even bad people can tell a lie every day, but good people might tell a lie once a month. Just say, for example, in the Lord's eyes, a lie is a lie. It doesn't matter if somebody lies every day or lies once a month or once a year. It's punishable, it's convictable, right? Up to, it is what it is. And so it doesn't matter if you're considered a righteous person or a wicked person. If you do stuff to other people that's in a good sense, you're going to get that thrown back at you. If you do stuff in a bad sense, you're going to get that thrown back at you, right? So because we're not perfect, even though we follow God and we're righteous or whatnot, we still can fall under this 7-year cycle. And in the Lord's eyes, whether you're a believer or non-believer, whether you're considered righteous or wicked, you're going to fall under this 7-year design. No different than how with society, every 7 years, your debt gets cleared. Whether you have one blip on your credit or 20 blips on your credit, whether you have a good credit rating or you're good with credit, or you have a bad credit rating, you're bad with credit, it's nothing personal, right? It's just that every 7 years it gets reset. So if you're a good person doing good credit things and your credit resets every 7 years, you don't got nothing to worry about, right? But it's not going to change that every 7 years it resets. It's the same thing with someone who's bad, right? Bad with credit, and their credit gets reset. Now they're happy because they get to start from scratch. Again, you can argue and say, well, that's not fair. Da, da, da. It's nothing of that. It's not a personal bode to you or them. It's just the way it is. Every 7 years, that credit gets reset, right? Because in the Bible talks about this, is that every 7 years, the debts have to be canceled. It also speaks about every 7 years you have to let your slaves or servants go, okay? So that's in one scripture. That is not Genesis that I'm talking about, or Joseph's story. That's a different one. But also, to back it up and confirm it, going in the story of Joseph, and I've made words on this in the past, that story in Joseph talks about the 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of famine. So it's yet another scripture and another context that hones in on the number 7 and specifically says you can have 7 years of good and 7 years of bad, 7 years of lots and 7 years of lack, right? It specifically talks about this. Now we know in the story of Joseph, for it doesn't say for 7 years, but the Lord has revealed to me that it was 7 years. Okay. So for 7 years, Joseph went through what he went through between the sold into slavery from his brothers. And so okay, stay with me here. When Joseph's dad gave Joseph the coat of many colors, it talks about how Joseph was favored by his dad, okay? So when Joseph was favored in his 7 year of plenty in his past, right? Because by the time we're born till the time we're grown, say we're 20, 30, 40, 50 years old, we've already had a few 7-year cycles come through our life, right? So in the past, when Joseph was younger, who knows how old he was, but he had favor from his dad. And again, going with what the Lord's showing me, for approximately a 7-year cycle, right? This means that Joseph was receiving lots while his brothers were receiving lack. He had 7 years of abundance and they had 7 years of famine. Not food-wise or money-wise, but he received the abundance and favor and love and attention from dad, and the brothers did not. So Joseph had lots and they had little when it comes to attention and favor from the father, okay? So then it switches to where now Joseph's the one that's going to go under the 7 years of famine and hardship, and so when his brothers sold him into slavery, his brothers were technically devilish, doing the devil's work, but it was God that allowed and sent the brothers to act devilish towards Joseph in the first place, because from God's mind, he's like, oh, the 7 years is up. It's time for Joseph to go into his 7-year cycle of famine. And so for 7 years, Joseph was sold into slavery. He had his brothers, treat him poorly. He was falsely accused by Potiphar's wife. He was falsely imprisoned. We saw throughout the book of Genesis and Joseph's story all these different difficulties and hardships that Joseph went through that seemed like were back to back to back, okay? Again, the Bible doesn't necessarily hone in specifically on the number 7, but the Lord himself has revealed to me that that's what happened. That was Joseph going through his 7-year famine cycle, okay? So then, when the time was drawing near, when this 7-year cycle of hardship, of owing a debt and, of him drawing the short straw, so to speak, was coming to a close, he received a spiritual gift from the Lord where he was able to interpret dreams, right? And this was to get him ready and prepared for this 7-year cycle to end. So say, for instance, going with the 7-year mass, say this started to happen to him on year 5 or something, year 6. It was getting him prepared in advance for when the 7-year time was going to come to an end. Because like we talk about the debts being canceled, every 7 years it gets reset. And the scripture says every 7 years you're to set your slaves free. So basically, Joseph was a slave because he was imprisoned, right? He was serving. He was in a slave type position compared to in the past, in contrast, when he was in favor from dad receiving the coat, right? And the favor. So now God knows that the 7 years is coming up and he's going to switch back to 7 years of plenty, right? So this is the ebb and flow of life, is that all of us humans on the planet, as long as we're alive on the earth, we're going to continue to ebb and flow through these 7-year cycles where we're up, we're down, where, things are in abundance and things are in lack, right? And if we compare this to who we see around the world, we see it. We see where celebrities are at the highlight, right? All of a sudden they blow up out of nowhere, and even sports stars and stuff like this, they become just like a total life of abundance. They have fame, they have attention, they have love, they have money, luxury, everything. And then all of a sudden out of nowhere, it seems like they get a DUI charge or something happens that just kind of pops up out of nowhere. And all of a sudden they're like down on their butt, right? And that's because their 7-year time was coming to an end. This is why throughout history, we don't see somebody, it doesn't matter who it is, where they're up and they stay up, 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 up forever and ever and ever. We don't see that. We constantly see, I'm going to say, okay, the Lord's telling me Donald Trump. Yes, Lord, thank you. We've even seen with Donald Trump, who's an older gentleman, probably in his 70s. He's went through quite a few of these 7-year cycles already in his lifetime. He's had periods of time where he was up and down and up and down. And yes, we understand that throughout all of his life, he's been a billionaire, or for the most part of his life. But you can still have, and this is the other thing the Lord was telling me, is that You can be in a 7-year cycle of abundance and still have struggle. You can also be in a 7-year period of famine and have small bits of abundance, right? Little blessings along the way. And so the Lord was even showcasing it with myself. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about myself for a moment, because the Lord was highlighting this message for the public, but also with myself in mind, specifically, personally. Okay, so it's 2025. I'm starting to come out of this 7-year cycle. For the last 7 years, going back to 2018, I have been in a cycle of struggle and hardship, right? Physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, you name it, it's happened over these last 7 years. Now, it doesn't mean that the 7 years prior, from approximately, say, 2011 to 2018, everything was peaches and cream. There were still struggles and hurdles and obstacles between that 7-year stretch too, of 2011 to 2018, but not to the level of struggle and hardship that it has been from 2018 to 2025. And there's been times throughout this course of this last 7-year cycle that I've went to Lord and I've said, what gives, Lord? Like, I don't understand. Like, 10 years ago, things weren't perfect, but they weren't like this. This wasn't happening and it wasn't like that. And the Lord is now bringing it full circle to me now with this epiphany and revealing to me. So he's revealed to me personally this personally, but also for the world. And now I'm seeing things totally different. It's like, okay, it makes so much sense. The Lord is saying it's not personal, Amanda. It's not, I wasn't trying to, attack you or cut you off at your knees or anything. Now, I know that the devil's tried to make you think that that was my agenda, and that he intentionally sent agents that I authorized to come against you to make you believe that even more so. But that's just part of the famine. This is the same thing, is that even though Joseph was sold into slavery from his brothers, that was gripes between him and his brothers. But then all of a sudden, Potiphar's wife is trying to come on to him, and he turns her down because he didn't want to lose his job, and he respected Potiphar and all this. And then all of a sudden, she's going and making false accusations about him and trying to destroy his reputation, his character, and say that he did things he never did. Where did that come from, right? So Joseph could have and probably did say to Lord, like, what's going on, Lord? Like, I had favor from my dad with my coat, and I'm a good person, and then all of a sudden I'm being betrayed by my brothers, and then I'm being enslaved, and then I'm being falsely accused by Potiphar's wife, and being looked like I'm a sexual offender, things like this. And he's like, this is not me. But that was part of it, right? So God was the one going against Joseph. And it's not because Joseph was such a bad guy and he deserved A, B, C, D. No, it's because of the 7-year cycle. The Lord's like, what do you want me to do, Joseph? Like, it's time for the 7-year cycle, And so you got to go through this crap, for lack of a better term, for 7 years in various forms, Some is verbal assaults, some is mental assaults, some is emotional assaults, physical assaults, whatever it may be. And you're going to be brought down to your knees. And yes, you're going to get closer to me and worship me more so in the process. And I'm going to receive the glory, which the Lord did. And that's also part of it as well. But it's not even all about that. It's not as deep necessarily as we make it to be, right? It's just simply that in the credit world, every 7 years, your credit gets reset. It's just how it goes. Every 7 years in the Bible, you set your slaves free. Every 7 years, your debts are canceled. So technically, Joseph owed a debt, right? A spiritual debt, and became a spiritual slave. But once the 7-year time frame was coming to a close, the Lord came in and did a couple things to make it so that Joseph, when the 7-year time was up, he could pull himself back out, right? And Joseph literally went, as we know, from the bottom, 7-year famine, falsely accused slave servant bottom, to the palace. And all of a sudden, so Joseph literally was the example of going from 7 years of famine to 7 years of abundance, right? And the Bible even talks about this. And then it goes further to talk about that when Joseph was in command, he was saying, we need to take care of the grain and get everything all battened down, because the Lord has told me that he's going to be bringing a famine. Why was that? Because Joseph was now receiving the same epiphany as I've received from the Lord, where he was becoming aware of how, because he went through it himself, how this 7-year cycle actually works. So it doesn't matter if everyone around him is going, it's fine, Joseph, we've been eating good for the last 5 years, go sit down, everything's just perfect. Joseph's like, you guys don't understand. I know how this works. The Lord himself has spoken a message to me, and not just that, I lived through this. I know what it's like to be up one minute and all of a sudden down the next, because I personally went through this, because I had favor from my dad when I was younger, and then when my 7-year famine cycle came to knock on the door, I got sold into slavery, I got falsely accused, I was in prison, you know what I mean? Whatever. So Joseph knows, and then he went from that to abundance. So Joseph, of all people, knows what it's like to go from 7 years down to 7 years up, and what those different transitions can look like, right? And so it made him aware for the rest of his life to not only to continue to glorify God, but to be wary of these 7-year cycles and to pay more attention to it. Because that's the thing, is I've lived now for quite a few years, and I've never in my life paid attention to this way, especially spiritually, to this number 7 and how it applies to the human lifestyle, okay? And even so much so is that when the Lord has been highlighting this to me in various ways over the course of the last few weeks, I've been kind of taking it with a grain of salt, and the Lord's like, no. So he's given me too much evidence by the way of the showing me the numbers and the different bits and pieces that he's been developing over the weeks. And then with the story of Joseph, it's just too much to ignore. You know what I'm saying? And then the Lord had me, like I was saying, reflect on my own life and see from my past what, like he was having me going back, like, okay, so you're in 2025 now. Do the math, go back 7 years as 2018. Have you been going through various struggles to the 9th degree over the course of the last 7 years? And I'm like, yes, Lord. He's like, but have I not blessed you throughout it and, provided you manna, right? And I said, yes, you have, Lord, but it's not in the abundance that I had it the 7 years prior. And the Lord's like, that's right. Because from 2018 to 2011, the 7-year cycle prior was your cycle of abundance. So I was in an abundant cycle between 2011 to 2018. It doesn't mean I didn't have any hiccups or hardships. I did, but not to the degree that I've had them from 2018 to 2025 over the course of these last 7 years. So that gets me into the next part, okay? So, the Lord's also asking me to add on. So that was that. So then the Lord also had me go and look back at other people who were going against me, the attackers that the Lord had authorized to be sent by the devil to come against me, and look at their past. And some of these people that come against me, I've known, some of them for 10, 20, 30 years, right? And so the Lord was showing me to look at the 7-year time frames in their lives as well. Go back to 2018, where were they? Go back to 2011, where were they? And some of these people that have been coming against me over the course of these last 7 years, and I've been scratching my head as to why, they were in a famine cycle between 2011 and 2018 while I was in an abundant one. So when the reset came via 2018, I went down between 2018 and 2025 into my famine. They went up from 2018 to 2025 into abundance. Okay. And so this is the thing, is that it's an ebb and flow back and forth. So sometimes I'm in abundance and the Lord is sending me to attack somebody who's in famine, because no different than how, Joseph was once in abundance in the past, but now all of a sudden he has Potiphar's wife and his brothers who are now in their cycle of abundance being sent to go and put Joseph down while he's enduring his cycle of famine, right? And so when one is up, one can be down, and when one is down, one can be up, right? And so I've talked about this before and made messages on this in the past, but the Lord was showing this to me in a whole new light. Like, I'm blown away by this. I'm like, oh, it makes so much more sense, Lord. Like, it makes sense because I literally saw people who were down on their butt, couldn't get lower in 2012, 2013, that all of a sudden were like brand new people in 2021. And I was even asking the Lord, okay, Lord, and we'll talk about levels to make it make sense. Say I was on a level 6 between 2011 and 2018. Now, there were times throughout 2018 and 2025, I was like on a level 3. And I'm like, Lord, this is not even making sense. Meanwhile, there were people that were coming against me that knew me personally and closely and intimately, that were in the past, when I was on that level 6, they were on a level 3, I would say so. And then now, during the same 7-year cycle of 2018 to 2025, we're on a level 6. So we literally switched places. I went from a 6 to a 3, and they went from a 3 to a 6. And I had noticed this, but I just kind of thought, well, it's just the luck of the draw type of a thing, right? And the Lord's like, no, Amanda, no, it's the 7-year cycle at play, right? This is why we talk about the 7-year itch in marriages, is because that's when testing comes around for that marriage, right? That marriage could be rock solid, and maybe on or around the 7-year time frame, the wife starts to get a wandering eye, and then things get rocky, or the man, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that they're both turning their back on the marriage at the exact same time. Maybe in some cases they do, but typically it's where one party zigs while the other party zags, right? And they go in two different directions. And the Lord is saying this is the same thing that plays, is that no different than going back to the credit example, where if somebody has good credit and every 7 years their credit resets, it's no bother, right? Oh, well, I'll just keep maintaining good credit for the next 20 years. But in the event that you have good credit and a slip up happens and you now have bad credit, it's sure a nice convenience to know that after 7 years, 3 years, 5 years, whenever the 7-year term is up, your credit's going to get reset, and you're going to go back to having, go back to zero and get to start and turn over a new leaf, right? It's just like Joseph. Once the 7-year time was up, and he could interpret the dream for Pharaoh, he was able to be released and then become second in command or whatnot. Only God, and God only, put Joseph in that lowly famine position in prison for 7 years. And God turned around and gave him a gift when it was coming to the end, that turned around and Joseph was able to use as the leverage to bounce him out of that 7-year famine hardship cycle into his 7-year of abundance cycle. Okay. And then he knew, with the information, the knowledge, and the wisdom, to make sure that in his position, he was going to take what he learned from his past and apply it to his new life, and make sure that he was covering things for the famine that was to come around. So it wasn't a food famine originally. It was a spiritual famine. Okay. It went from spiritually famine to spiritually abundant. But then after the fact, it turned into physical famine to physical abundance, right? So it was spiritual, and then it was physical, right? So this is the thing, is that you may have, throughout the 7 years, maybe not all of you, but some of you, maybe have maintained a job, maybe have maintained the lights on, maybe have maintained having a vehicle, maybe have maintained taking care of your children. But so from a physical viewpoint, your physical ducks have all been fairly lined up, right? But spiritually, you have been going through the ringer spiritually, okay? But then other times you could be in your cycle of abundance, and you could move into a new home. You could get a new vehicle. You could get a husband or a wife, right? Celebrate a new baby. And it could be all blessings and abundant and everything. Maybe when you were in your 7-year famine cycle at your job, you had just started there and only been working there for a year or 2 or 3 and were making minimum wage, right? But once your 7-year cycle reset, and now you've been with that company for, say, 4 or 5 years, well, now all of a sudden, because you've crossed over from your 7-year famine to your 7-year of plenty, now you get a raise and a bonus, and now you're making, $5,000 extra a month than you were before. And because of that, you're able to go and buy a new house. You upgrade your home, you upgrade your vehicle. You're literally doing better now than you were 5 years ago, right? The thing that people give themselves the credit, and they say, oh, I worked harder. Oh, I, tried harder. I worked smarter, not harder. Things like this, right? And the Lord is saying, no, it's, I'm not taking away from your talent, but it's not that. It's that the 7-year cycle. Okay. And so the Lord is saying, not just for me, but for you, just try it. Just look back at your life, however old you are, go back every 7 years and just see, does this message apply to you as well? right? And I'm sure it will, because the Lord was saying this is for everybody. This is for everyone on the planet. Good, bad, ugly, spiritual, religious, wicked, righteous, it doesn't matter. It's for everyone, okay? And so this even happens to us as children, but we don't pay attention to it when we're children, right? We start to pay attention to it when we're grown, because by then we have the wisdom to see the differences between ourselves in the past, ourselves in the present, where we were before and where we are now, and when we were down and now we're up, or opposite, where we were up and now we're down. We're also able to see it with those around us, right? So Lord was showing me in my personal life, the 7 years that I've just went through from 2018 to 2025, and he's showing it to me in a whole new way. And then even where I was at the 7-year cycle before, between 2011 to 2018 versus 2018 to 2025. And with this in mind, I see stark differences, and now it makes sense as to why. And the same exact thing happened to Joseph. He went from 7 years of hardship and crazy things to all of a sudden 7 years of abundance and plenty. And it was just like that, like a snap of a fingers. It changed. And so someone could say, when you're up and you go down, oh, the devil's in your life. The devil's at work. No, it's not. That's God. And same thing goes when you're down and you go up. Oh, you're doing devil works. That's devil works. No, it's not. It's God. God is using the devil as the tool to bring you down or bring you up, per se, but he is authorizing and in charge of these 7-year cycles for every human on the planet. And the Lord was telling me that righteous people and wicked people, all the same and all alike, go through these 7-year cycles. Even children, okay? And as we know, children aren't, they're innocent, right? But even they go through this too. This is why Joseph was receiving the favor as a child from dad, but the brothers weren't. But then the tables turned after 7 years, and the brothers were put in a position to throw Joseph into slavery, and Joseph went from being favored to getting put down to the lowest he'd been, right? And so those tables turned where the Joseph was up and the brothers were down. Well, now 7 years later, now the brothers are up and Joseph's down. But then after 7 years, change went by, and Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dream and was released from prison. Now he went back to 7 years up, and he was above the brothers, because it talks about how he met up with the brothers after they'd been estranged for so long, and the brothers were surprised that Joseph was in the position that he was in. And this is the thing, is that it takes somebody who knows God or hears from God to receive this information, to be able to interpret it and receive it and put it out. For me, if I wasn't walking with the Lord right now, I wouldn't have received this message. And so the only reason why I'm able to receive this message is just like how Joseph received the gift of dream interpretation from the Lord. I have received the gift of understanding the Lord in interpretation as well, because it's what's required for me into my next cycle, okay? And so this gets me into the second thing is that we're seeing it right now. We're seeing a lot of people that have been up over the course of the last 7 years. We've seen them going down over these last 7 years, have we not? So people that were, say, up in 2018, 2019, 2020, we've seen them starting to go down between, say, 2022, 2020, 2023, 2024, 2025. We have seen it, right? And this can go for celebrities. This can go, and the only reason why we see it with celebrities is because they're in the public eye. They literally have people watching them 24/7, paparazzi, they're posting on social media, things like this. So they stay very in our face, right? But the Lord is saying that, like, we can use celebrities as an example of what goes up must come down, right? But this isn't just focused on celebrities. This is happening behind the scenes every single day in everyday people's lives as well. All the way from a 1-month-old all the way up into a 110-year-old and anywhere in between. As long as you're alive on this planet, you're going to be succumbed to these 7-year cycles. And the Lord says that there's nothing that you can do about it. Now, some of these, the devil knows this, okay? So some of these people that have been coming against you, one of the motivating factors of why they've been coming against you, and yes, this looks like family. Yes, this looks like your partner. Yes, this looks like friends. Old friends, old acquaintances. Yes, because they know that they are about to go into their 7-year famine, and that you're about to go into your 7 year of abundance. They don't want you to go up and they don't want to come down. You understand? And so this is the thing, is that they're likened to Joseph's brothers, where they know, they don't maybe necessarily know this like the way I'm explaining it, because, or maybe they do, I don't know, but not in the way that I've received it, because I've received it divinely from the Lord. But the Lord was showing me that some of the people that have been coming against me, they have something in common. And it's that between 2011 and 2018, when I was doing better, I was in a cycle of abundance. They, during that same time frame, were in a cycle of famine. And they, like Joseph's brothers, wanted to see me down, right? And so when the Lord allowed the cycles to change and for them to go from down to up and me to go from up to down, they were more than willing and jumping and for joy to be the very hands to go and do this dirty work, right? Because the Lord isn't necessarily doing it, but he is doing it. He's authorizing the devil to come against you, and the devil's sending his agents in the form of people to do the dirty work. However, it's technically the Lord that is sending these things towards you, okay? But the Lord isn't doing it because you're a bad person and you're so terrible and horrible and awful. This is what the devil tries to make you believe. It's just like when Joseph didn't do anything to Potiphar's wife. But don't you think it didn't stop her from going and tarnishing his image and saying bad things about him and trying to make him look like something he's not? And don't you think that while that was unfolding, he was feeling pretty down and out? The Bible doesn't necessarily get into the specifics, but you just got to imagine, what if someone was falsely accusing you of a dirty, heinous crime like that? And not only did you not do it, you're innocent completely, right? And so it doesn't get into all the little details, but I'm sure there was gossiping going on and things like this. And Joseph couldn't do anything about it except for just take it, because it was in his cycle of famine. And so this is the thing, is the Lord is saying that some of these people have resorted to dirty measures that have been coming against you because, one, we're correct in our perceptions. We're all right. They don't want to see chosen ones go into their cycle of abundance, which is happening whether they like it or not, by the way, because that's just how it is. Every 7 years this takes place. No one can stop it. It's been happening since Bible days, right? They not only do they not want that for you, but even more so, they don't want to go down. You see, if you know that, if you don't know you're in a cycle of abundance or a cycle of famine, you just take things as they come. You just chalk it up to the game of life, right? When good things are happening, you're like, oh, it's a good time. And when bad things are happening, you're like, everybody struggles, right? You just chalk it up to everybody has goods and bads, right? And that's correct. You're right. But the reason why people have goods and bads is it is all designed around the 7-year cycle, okay? So the good news is, if you're going through a rough patch and it's seeming to draw out and last, and it seems like you're getting it from all sides and angles, just rest assured in the fact that there's a time limit on it. There's an expiration date on it. No, you are going to have struggles and hardships till the day you pass. I'm not going to say you're not, right? For all of us on this planet, as long as we're walking around breathing and alive, we're going to have good days and bad days, good times and bad times, good seasons and bad seasons. And like I said already, you can be in a season of plenty and have struggle. You can be in a season of famine and have blessing, right? But I'm talking about overall, right? The majority. And if you look back at your previous 7-year cycles, you can probably see what highlights, look back and see what 7-year cycle ago did you have a birth of a child or win a lottery or something? Or not just, but a windfall, come into some form of money, right? What other 7-year cycle did you lose a loved one? And again, it doesn't necessarily apply to your 7-year cycle. Like, for instance, I lost a loved one in 2023, but that bodes into my cycle of famine, right? Which would be expiring in 2025. But that was more so perhaps their cycle of famine, right? You know what I'm saying? So there's an overlap there between us, because we're not someone else. We're ourselves. We're in charge of ourselves. But you can see where, for instance, between 2011 and 2018, that 7-year cycle of abundance for me, I had two children. I had 2 babies in that 7-year time frame, right? Between 2018 and 2025, no children. So this is the thing. I didn't struggle with maintaining a roof over my head between 2011 and 2018, but I did between 2018 and 2025. You see? And so it doesn't mean that the Lord didn't bless me. Every day I still had food. Every day I still was able to maintain the physical elements that are required for life. But that's why the Lord was telling me that was manna. And we know about manna from the book of Exodus is that it's just enough for the day, right? So it's not in plenty, it's not in abundance. And God even had strict instructions for Moses that they were only supposed to eat for that day and gather enough for the day, and that they weren't to collect it for too long, because if they did, it was going to go bad. Meaning that the Lord wasn't allowing them to be in overdrive, like in overabundance, right? In overdoing it. They were only allotted what was needed for that day. And they wandered around and everything, right? And this is why they were complaining. And it's because they were in a 7-year cycle of hardship and famine. But it dragged on because they weren't, aware of what was all happening, okay? And so this is why the Lord is bringing this to my attention. This is why he brought it to Joseph's attention, okay? So there's other scriptures that this message applies to in the Bible, but the main key scripture, book for this message is from the book, the book of Genesis, but the story of Joseph, okay? And because the Lord was saying that's the best, closest example, is that so for 7 years, Joseph was up and in a good cycle, and then it turned around, and for 7 years, he was in a harsh cycle. And that was, again, not because Joseph was so sinful and he was so terrible and awful, even though he may have been made to feel that way. That was all just parts of carrying on that cycle of hardship and famine to make it what it was supposed to be, right? Then he turned around and was released from the cycle, not only from prison, but the cycle of famine. I hope we're understanding the symbolism there. He got freed from... So it's saying that he got put in prison falsely, and then he was freed from prison, okay? The same other scripture in the Bible says every 7 years you're to free the slave, okay? So meaning, why is it... So the symbolism here is that, yes, they're talking about a crime that Joseph wasn't guilty of. However, the Lord was showing me the spiritual symbolism in there is that when this happens to you, chosen one, and you go into this cycle of famine, you're innocent. You may think you did things to put yourself in this terrible famine cycle. You didn't. People may make you believe the same. It's not true, okay? You are innocent. It's nothing personal. It's just the way it goes. And this is why I've said to Lord, because I've said, Lord, I'm a good person. I have a good heart. I'm not perfect. I fall short, but I'm a good person with a good heart, and I've always been this way. Why would you allow these other people to backstab and betray me, who are not as good of a person as I am, who do not have the type of heart space that I have, who are not trying to seek you, who are not living as sinless lives, blameless lives as they can? They are way more sinful than me. Why? I don't understand. You have me in a spiritual chokehold, but then you have these other ones who deserve to be in a spiritual chokehold. If anything, I am innocent. They're not. They're guilty of 10 times the infractions I've done, and yet they're living their best life. Please explain. And the Lord said, this is why. This is why. It's the 7-year cycle. When you were up, Amanda, in your past, they were down. And now you're down and they're up. And this is why they're coming at you so hard, and they're trying to do everything that they can, is because you're right. They aren't as righteous as you. They aren't as blameless as you. They're not as innocent as you. And this is why they're fighting tooth and nail to not only keep you down in that cycle of famine, but also keep themselves in the cycle of plenty. But it doesn't work that way. No human person can do anything, whether physically or spiritually, that can cause somebody to stay in their 7-year downtime famine and simultaneously have themselves or someone else stay up in an abundance. It doesn't work like that. It's just like going back to the credit thing, where whether you have good credit or bad credit, every 7 years it resets. It doesn't matter if you're a great person or a bad person, if you have stellar credit or poor credit, every 7 years those debts are cleared, right? And that's boding to the Bible that talks about the same thing, that every 7 years the debt has to be cleared. And every 7 years you have to set your servant slave free, Okay? So when somebody is owing a debt spiritually and they're being treated or made to feel like they're a slave or a servant in a downtime, just know there's an expiration date on that. It's not going to last forever. It's just a cycle. You may think it's going to last forever, and people may try to make you feel like it's going to last forever, but chances are those that are doing that are the very same ones that were down 7 years ago that were jealous and envious of the fact that you were abundant. Just like how Joseph's brothers were jealous of the fact that he was in a cycle of abundance when he was younger with dad and receiving the coat. You understand? And so this is the thing, is that it does come down to like what goes around comes around, and karmic debt and judgment and wrath and things like this. It does, right? An eye for an eye. The Lord doesn't let us get away the golden rule, what you do unto others will be done unto you. The Lord doesn't let us get away with doing things to people. It's a spiritual law, right? But another spiritual law coupled in with that is this 7-year cycle. So the law states that what's down must come up every 7 years, and what's up must come down every 7 years. What's debted must be reset after 7 years, and what's enslaved must be released after 7 years. Okay? So now that takes me into July 7th, 2025. So because 2 and 4 last year was 6, 2 and 3 the year before was 5, 2 and 2 the year before was 4. This year, 2 and 5, 2025 makes 7. So this year, 2025, marks the completion of this downturn famine cycle and marks the progressing of and starting afresh into this new cycle of abundance. Okay, it is taking place in 2025. And because we've now reached the middle point of 2025 via June, July, right, on the Gregorian calendar, this is where it comes to play. And this is why the Lord is showcasing to me July 7th, 2025, 777. And he did this via showing me on my odometer 12 days ago, 777, just to make it stick. And like I said, I will make a post with it if I remember to show that, okay? So he gave me a physical show, right, through the numbers. Now he's giving me 12 days later the spiritual backup through this message, and he's correlating them together. So in closing, what this looks like is that I myself, and you as well, chosen one, if this resonates for you, and the Lord was saying for a lot of chosen ones, those that are right now grinding for God as we speak, okay, those who are righteous, those who are good people, who have clean hands and pure hearts, they, for the most part, I can speak for them and say 99% chance they could identify and relate with this message, because they were like myself, like Joseph, where they have just spent the last 7 years between June 2018 and June 2025, right? 7 years going through the cycle of famine and hardship and difficulty, and probably simultaneously seeing other people who were on a lower scale to them in various ways, right, that were simultaneously behind them, coming off as above them. Just like what happened with Joseph and his brothers. Went from Joseph had the coat and the favor and the brothers didn't, to where all of a sudden, fast forward 7 years later, and now they're teenagers, and Joseph's brothers are selling him into slavery. They did that because of their evil hearts. And so a lot of the people that we've saw up over the last 7 years, 2018 to 2025, we are now witnessing them coming down. And if we haven't seen it as of yet, today as I'm speaking, it's going to be unfolding over the next month or two, like as this cycle changes hands. We hear people talk about the changing of the guard. It's the same thing, where it's like it takes time for one cycle to finish completely and one cycle to start again. The Lord is showing me the sands in an hourglass right now. How you can see on an hourglass timer that the time is dwindling down. You don't know if there's seconds or minutes left on that timer, but you can physically see that it's dwindling down to, and eventually going to come to a complete stop. Then to start again, you have to flip that hourglass over and start from new, start fresh, right? It's the same idea, is that the Lord at this time as I speak is having the last grains of the hourglass, the proverbial hourglass, okay, of this 7-year cycle that has just gone through from spring or June 2018 to June 2025. The final grains in the hourglass are coming to a close. And so it's just a matter of small time before the hourglass ends, like that stops and it's done and gets flipped over and starts fresh, right? Could be days, could be weeks, could be months. But it's right around this time, and the Lord is highlighting to me July 7th, 2025 as maybe a starting day or an end day. I don't know. But I've been feeling spiritual rumblings all throughout this spring season. Well, actually since winter, but even stronger through spring. And the Lord has been highlighting to me that we're going into the summer season, and at the end of June here, there's going to be a crossover from one season to another on the calendar from spring to summer, right? And I've made past messages already talking about how the spring was going to be kind of the breaking out point, the hatching point, right? For the chicks and the butterflies and the flowers and all the new. And then the summer is going to be the highlight, okay? The Lord was actually, he's reminding me of a vision he showed me yesterday. He was showing me a butterfly flittering around and then on flowers. And he asked me, he said, when do you normally see butterflies? And I said, probably June to July, somewhere in there. And he's like, that's right. He's like, you don't see the butterflies in action typically in April and May. You usually do in the dead of summer, the climax, the heat of summer from June to July, right? And normally you see them on really hot days. Like you won't see them on rainy days, right? It's days that the sun is just pouring down and it's hot out. That's when you'll see them flittering around. It's typically June to July. That's their peak. And the Lord was saying, that's right. So we are those butterflies, you know, shaking off our wings like the real biological butterflies are as well. And there's going to be new happening, like testing those wings out in through June to July specifically and moving forward from there, because this cycle is shifting, okay? And this is something that the Lord has been showing me a lot over the course of the last couple of months in so many different ways, via different, one piece here, one piece there, one piece here, one piece there, right? And I know that a lot of chosen ones, the Lord has led me to other chosen ones messages for confirmation and such, is that they're picking up the same thing I am, right? But this is the first time that the Lord has put all of the eggs in one basket to show me about this thing, about the 7-year cycle. So we can take comfort in knowing that every 7 years, if you're going through a downtime, it's going to turn around after 7 years, somewhere in there, right? That's the time frame. However, take it as a note of caution that if you're up, it can also change every 7 years, okay? And that's the other thing that I asked the Lord that. I said, okay, so Lord, how do we stay abundant? Because knowing this, I want to be like Joseph. I want to be, prepared, and I want to do things accordingly. I don't want to go down, up, down, up, down, up, and, have 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine, 7 years of plenty. What can I do to maintain, my abundant cycles and not fall into the cycles of famine all the time? And the Lord said the only way to achieve that, to go from glory to glory to glory, is to walk with the Lord. That's the only way that it can be done. And this is the thing, is that the Lord has told me, I'm not going to name names, but there's people that are in my personal life that I have known for, 10 years. And I saw them in really, their life had went down the tubes and were in really poor situations that they put themselves in. And they turned around and, I literally saw drug addicts get better, right? And no one thought they would. And I knew it was an act of God even back when, because there's no other explanation for it. I literally saw people who didn't really, they're kind of the forage of society, in my opinion, didn't really deserve, and all of a sudden they're looking better, they're making more money, they have a lighter heart, things like this. And I see them like glow up, and I'm like, what's going on, Lord? And the Lord said, I did that. So when we see scourge of society get redeemed, right? We see this. We see someone who in, say, 1 year, maybe they're a relative or a family member or a friend or something like that. and an associate, and you see them like in the throes of, say, an addiction, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you see them 2 years later and they're all cleaned up and they have a job and a home and everything seems great. And you're like, wow, they really did a 180. They went from, the lowest of the low to, the best of the best. What happened? That was God. That's what God said. That was God. So it was him. This is the thing, is what God, when we see these celebrities that were on the up and up 10 years ago falling down today, that's God bringing them down, because it's time for their 7-year cycle of famine. Because not everything will stay up and not everything will stay down, okay? Just like with Job, just like with Joseph, okay? But simultaneously, when we see people that are down and they're down on the bottom and they make their way miraculously to the top, it's the same hands doing the work. God's hands will divinely bring someone from a high position down to the lowest position possible, all the way to in jail, all the way as a slave. Even if they're not physically a slave, spiritually in bondage, spiritually in chains. The Lord will do that. He will take the free and put them in bondage, but he'll also take those in bondage and make them free. And this is why we'll even see like people, they've been in jail for 10, 20 years, falsely accused. They're innocent. They're innocent like Joseph, falsely accused. And all of a sudden, some people perish in jail, right? But others get free. And it's like something just miraculously happens. They could have went for 10 parole hearings and got denied. And all of a sudden they're like, yeah, okay, you're paroled. And then they're free. And it's like, wow. Or they run a DNA test and realize that they were innocent, and then they exonerate them. And then that person ends up receiving millions of dollars because they sue the state or something. They literally went from 1 year being a servant to society, a slave to society, in prison, the lowest you can be, to like physically and spiritually in bondage, to where all of a sudden they're free and they are rich, right? And they literally go from one extreme to another. And the Lord is saying that's him. So when we see these higher, upper level people in society, right, whether you know them personally or just, in public, come down, that is the Lord tearing them down. And the Lord himself isn't going to come and say, hey, I'm tearing you down. He's going to use other people to do it. Those that have those less righteous hearts, those who don't mind getting dirty hands, right? He's going to use them to tear these people down. This is why the saying says, you lay down with dogs, you wake up with fleas, right? And so this is the thing, is that the Lord will still give bad people good cycles, right? Sometimes, right? But the Lord will also use those people as tools to effectively do the job for him, if that's making sense. And so the devil takes the credit a lot of time. When we see somebody go from down to up, we say, oh, they're doing magic, they're doing devil works. No, it was God. You're giving the devil credit for God's work. But simultaneously, if we see someone going up to down, we're like, oh, it's karma. They're bad people. They're in sin. It's the devil, at work in them. They're running with the devil. No, again, we're giving the devil credit. That was God. God took that person down to up and that person up to down. God is the only source that can make this happen. These divine interventions, these divine shifts and cycle changes, okay? And so these people that have been sent to come against you, chosen one, they know that their 7-year of plenty, their 7-year up cycle is dwindling down to an end, like those grains of sand in the hourglass. And that simultaneously, that hourglass is going to get flipped over, and then you who were on the bottom is going to now go onto the top, and now your 7-year cycle of abundance is going to start. So it's a two-sided coin. They don't want to go back down to famine because they know what that road's like. They've walked it in the past when they were down before, when you were up. And simultaneously, they don't want you to go from down to up. But they don't have a choice. That is what is happening. That is what is happening in everybody's life at this time, is this 7-year cycle change, because it's time. There is nothing that you can physically or spiritually do, chosen one, to bring yourself up or someone else down. And simultaneously, there's nothing that these wicked ones can do to bring themselves up or someone else down. This is all hinging on the intervention and timing of the Lord. And the Lord is the one that's going to do this, okay? So the Lord is the one that brought you down over these last 7 years, chosen one, not the devil. And the Lord is going to be the one that's going to bring you up from these last 7 years from down to up, not the devil. And the Lord is going to be the one that's going to bring these people that have been up for the last 7 years in their cycle of abundance while you were in famine, back down where they previously were in the past, down to their cycle of famine, and simultaneously bring you up to your abundance, not the devil. Okay? So if these people try to say that when they see this switcheroo happen, that you've been working with the devil to make this happen, don't be shocked and surprised, because it's actually God that's done it. He's been doing it for thousands of years. And also, thank you, Lord. The Lord is saying also with a word of caution is that, like Joseph in the Bible, Joseph was careful. He was attentive to things because knowing this 7-year cycle. So that's why the Lord showed this to me, was so I could be aware of this. And he also, at first, I thought that the Lord just wanted me to keep this message to myself. But the Lord is saying, no, I want you to put this message out. And he's been nudging and nudging and nudging me to do it. Okay. So he wants other chosen ones that come across this message, because it's timeless, to receive this message and know. So if a wicked one comes across this message and you're trying to do some sort of voodoo, hoodoo, you do, woo-doo to try to keep yourself up, it's not going to work. And bring somebody else down or keep them down, it's not going to work. And if you felt that you went from down to up and someone else went from up to down, and then that gave you a power boost or something like that, I'm here to tell you that that was not you, that was not that person, that was not the devil, that was God. And that every 7 years, this cycle gets reset. There is nothing that anybody on this planet of Earth can do to change the tables. The tables turn when the Lord turns them, and when his timing comes to turn them, okay? And if you're a chosen one and this message resonates for you, and you can identify with what I've been saying in this message, just, take the revelation, the confirmation from it as what it is. And of course, take it back to the Lord. But take comfort and solace in knowing that there is an expiration date and that things are going to be changing. Okay. And the reason why we have felt such an uptick the last 6 months of 2025, this blowback against the chosen ones, is because it's changing. You know what I mean? It doesn't change overnight. It doesn't go from bad to good and good to bad. You literally see people rise to the top and fall down, right? It takes some time for the sand to completely run out of that hourglass and for it to be reflipped, right? It's like when you're playing a board game and you're waiting for the turn to end, you have to just sit there and watch the hourglass for a couple minutes as it fizzles out. And then when it does, you flip it back over, right? It takes a couple moments for that to occur. That is the proverbial timing that is happening at this time. These people that have been up wrongly, right? But I mean, it is what it is, but up wrongly over these last 7 years are seeing the proverbial sands dwindling down. And every day that goes by, every month that goes by, and now that we're on the cusp, they're knowing that it's coming to an end, a complete end, and that once it's over, it's going to get flipped, and then that's going to be the starting of this switcheroo, right? So they've been trying to stop and slow down and delay this switcheroo, and that is why so if you haven't been being spiritually attacked to the 10th degree, you're probably going down into a cycle of famine, okay? And for those of you that have been attacked to the 10th degree, it's probably because you're going to a cycle of abundance. Because who wants to be down in famine? Nobody wants to be down in famine. Everybody wants to be in abundance and plenty, right? Everybody wants that. And so they're aware of this in some way, shape, or form. What I'm talking about here, they're aware of what I'm talking about. And so they're trying to do what they can to keep you down and keep themselves up and basically play God and stop God's hand. But it's not going to happen. Just like how every 7 years, the debt cycle gets reset too, right? And no human person can stop that. And even if a human person said, okay, I'm going to stop this, the Lord would find a way to divinely intervene, because his words in the Bible that we base it off of talk about that every 7 years, debts are supposed to be canceled and slaves are supposed to be released. So you've had a debt, chosen one. You've been felt like a slave, treated like a slave, made to think you're a slave. None of that is true. It is what it is. The Lord is going to be bringing you out. You're going to be on a whole new up and up. You're going from one down cycle to an up one. And take these words as a word of caution and warning as to how to handle it moving forward. And the Lord is saying you can continue to maintain this abundance as long as you walk with Him. In the past, what had happened was when you did have cycles of abundance, you didn't maybe know, I know I sure didn't know about what I'm talking about in this message, and that what goes up can come down and what goes down can come up, right? And that it runs on this time frame, or timeline, I should say. And so you couldn't respond accordingly, right? You couldn't act accordingly. But it's due to a message like this. This is why this message is so powerful. This is why the Lord wants me to release it, is because there's prophecy in this, there's encouragement in this, there's revelation in this, there's confirmation in this, because maybe this is something you already have been thinking about yourself, but that there's also warning in this, right? There's a cautionary tale in this. And even Joseph, okay, thank you, Lord. The Lord is encouraging you to read the story of Joseph. Maybe you have, but as a refresher with these words I've spoke, take these words with the story of Joseph and put it together and apply it and reflect on your life and even those around you and see where this may play out for you. And of course, take it back to God, right? Because this is very important information, not only from leaving behind one thing and moving into a new thing, but also how to act accordingly and maintain it moving forward, right? No different than how Joseph had to respond and act a certain way moving forward, knowing what he knew after the fact as well, right? And the Lord is saying that it's possible to maintain abundance as long as you walk with the Lord. And don't get me wrong, you can be in abundance and still have bad things, terrible moments, bad things happen, right? Just like you can be in your famine cycle and receive little blessings and little smiles from the Lord along the way. But I'm talking about overall. So if you have noticed yourself over these last 7 years, feel like you've went down from where you were 7 years prior, and or noticed other people that have been coming against you seem like they're in a above you higher position of you today than say versus 7 years ago as well. If you can see where the tables have turned from 7 years ago to these last 7 years, basically 2011 to 2025, then you can see what I'm talking about, okay? But it's going to go to the next one from 2025 to 2032, and then there's going to be, it's going to be different now moving forward. So you were up, then you were down, now you're going back up. These people were down, then they went up, and now they're going back down, okay? And we're seeing that. We're seeing these shifts and changes, and it's happening very slowly, but this is wise because it's to do with timing, right? No different than how if the mom is going to give birth to the baby on, we'll just say July 7th at 7 p.m., she can start going into labor on, July 5th, right? And be in labor for 2 days before she actually has that baby. And she can be in all kinds of pain and distress and duress for 2 days before the showtime actually comes, when that birth time happens, right? And so this is the thing, is just like birth pains, they get closer when the timing is near. This is what's been happening over the course of these first 6 months of 2025, is that the timing is drawing near, and these ones that are up know it. And so this is why they're trying to change things and slow things and switch things, is because they don't want you to go up, but they surely don't want to go back down. And one of the reasons why they're going to go back down is because they didn't walk with the Lord like they were supposed to. I just said this 5 minutes ago, is that while you're up, maintain your composure and maintain your position with the Lord, so that this can continue to be 7 year after 7 year after 7 year, right? But if you start to turn your back on the Lord and glorify yourself like these people were guilty of doing, then when the 7 year time comes up for you, like it has for them, and it's 2032 now, you're going to just go right back down to the cycle of famine, like these people are too, right? And the Lord is saying the more life that we live, the harder it can get in that way, because he has higher expectations of us than he does when we're children. Like I said already, the Lord said that this applies to children, but they don't have the same line to toe that an adult has, right? Because once you've lived for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and the Lord has instilled wisdom in you through these 7-year cycles, through experience and stuff, he expects you to know how to handle yourself. We expect more from a 6-year-old than we do from a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old, right? It's the same thing. The Lord expects you to have learned this lesson by now when you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, just like Joseph did, right? And this is why the Bible talks about how Joseph was prepared, because he knew what was going to happen, because he received wisdom through experience of what he went through himself when he was in his 7-year downtime. Okay? So that's why the Lord is sending me with this message today, and for those that come across it, is so that the wicked can know something and that the righteous can know something. So that the righteous know how to handle themselves accordingly moving forward and throughout the duration of their life, throughout these 7 years. Because again, what goes up can come down, and what goes down can go up, and it's around this 7-year time frame. Okay? And again, read the book of Genesis, the story of Joseph, for more revelation for you specifically, right? The Lord is saying that. And for you wicked ones, let it be a lesson to you that this is what it was. The Lord did bless you. For these wicked ones thinking that it was the devil brought you down and the devil blessed them, they're wrong. It was God the whole entire time. This entire time, it was God. God brought down Joseph, and God brought him up. God brought down Job, and God brought him up. The devil just did the dirty work. God brought you down, and now he's going to bring you up. God brought these people down, and then he brought them up, and now he's bringing them back down, because it's nothing personal. It's just the 7-year time frame is here for such, right? And not just that, these people weren't like Joseph. They did not prepare in advance. They didn't learn from the cycle prior, and they're going to learn it this time if they're lucky, because it'll just repeat again for them. So you know that you're going up from 2025 to 2032, chosen one. These ones are going down from 2025 to 2032. But when 2032 comes, are you still going to be up, chosen one? Or are you going to go back down like you did between 2018 and 2025? And same with these wicked ones. Are you going to learn the lesson? Are you going to get close to God and be prepared throughout this next 7 years like Joseph did, so that when you can be released out of your slavery and your debt in 2032, are you going to turn over a new leaf for the next 7 years? Right? So, yeah. So anyway, the Lord is telling me to leave it here. I'll be back when he leads me to with anything else. I know it'll find the right ears, and it's right in perfect timing, and I hope it finds you well. Take care, and God bless.